Welcome, everyone. Thanks for making time for this. If you sit in HR, EHS, compliance, or operations, heat has quietly moved onto your desk this year, whether anyone formally handed it to you. So that's what we're going to work through today. What OSHA expects in 2026, where most employers are exposed, and the specific steps you can take from an HR seat to get ready. One quick note before we start. Everything in this session is educational. It is not legal advice, and it is not a substitute for talking to qualified counsel or a safety professional about your own sites. Treat what you hear today as a working framework, then pressure test it against your own operations. Let's get into it. Let me set the stage with 3 things that changed the conversation this year. First, on April 10th, 2026, OSHA updated its Heat National Emphasis Program, the NEP. Second, that program names 55 high-risk industries for targeted attention. And third, and this is the one people miss, it covers indoor and outdoor heat. This is no longer a construction in July issue. Here's the honest problem this webinar is built to solve. Most employers already know heat is dangerous. That's not the gap. The gap is that very few have a clear, documented operating system to prevent heat illness before something forces the issue, before OSHA shows up, before a worker goes down, before a crew falls apart in the middle of a shift. And from where I sit in HR, I see the same 5 patterns over and over. Workers hide their early symptoms because they're afraid of discipline or production pressure or just looking weak in front of the crew. Supervisors aren't sure when to add a break, stop the work, write it down, or call for help. HR treats heat as EHS's problem, which means onboarding, training, leave, and anti-retaliation never get connected to it. Temporary and new workers get put in the heat before they're trained or acclimatized. And indoor heat in warehouses, kitchens, factories, laundries, distribution centers gets missed entirely. Every one of those is a people problem as much as a safety problem. That's why HR has to be in this conversation. So let's be precise about what the updated NEP actually does, because precision here protects you. As of April 10th, 2026, OSA refreshed its National Emphasis Program for both outdoor and indoor heat hazards. Practically, it does 4 things. It directs enforcement resources toward workplaces where heat stress risk is likely high, indoor and outdoor. It names 55 high-risk industries, with construction, agriculture, warehousing, and manufacturing as core examples for inspection focus. And it reinforces the expectations that have been there all along. Water, rest, shade, planning, hazard recognition, training, and emergency response. Here's the part I really want you to take back to your leadership. Enforcement is already active. OSHA does not need a brand new heat rule to walk into your site. They can inspect, ask questions, and issue citations for heat hazards today, using the General Duty Clause and existing guidance. And in an inspection, the questions are predictable. Did you identify the heat hazards? Did you train your workers? Did you put feasible controls in place? And can you prove it with records? That last word is the whole game. From an employer risk standpoint, your readiness gets judged on what you can document, not on your good intentions, not on what you meant to do, on what you can show. I'm going to slow down here because this single slide is where a lot of well-meaning employers create their own problems. 2 things are true at the same time, and confusing them creates both compliance risk and credibility risk. On the left, the OSHA Heat NEP is active now. The updated National Emphasis Program is in effect, and OSHA is actively focusing inspections and enforcement on heat hazards in 2026. So the message is, prepare now, because enforcement is real today. On the right, the federal heat rule is still pending. The Federal Heat Injury and Illness Prevention Standard is not final. That proposed rule is still working its way through the rulemaking process. So here is the line you and your supervisors should never cross. Do not say the final federal rule is in effect. It isn't. If you tell your workforce or your managers that a national heat rule is now law, you've said something inaccurate. And the moment someone catches that, every other thing you've told them gets second-guessed. Get the framing right, and your credibility stays intact. Everything else we covered today hangs off this first remedy, a written, site-specific heat illness prevention plan, a HIIPP. And I want to reframe what that document actually is. A real plan is not a binder you can point to. It's your operating system for heat. It's how the place runs when it gets hot. You build it before peak season, and you update it after every incident or near miss, not once a year because someone remembered to. A complete plan covers 6 things, and you'll recognize all of them as we go. Water, rest, and shade. Cooling access built into every shift. Acclimatization. Staged exposure for new and returning workers. Monitoring and triggers. Actually watching the conditions and the symptoms. Training. Supervisors and workers before the season, not during the first heat wave. Emergency response. Clear steps decided in advance, not improvised. And documentation. Proof the plan is live every day. From the HR side, this matters because the plan touches onboarding, manager training, leave, and record keeping, all of which live with us. So we shouldn't be receiving this plan, we should be co-authoring it. This is the blind spot I worry about most, so I gave it its own slide. Do not rely only on the outdoor temperature. Indoor heat is its own hazard, and it's driven by things the weather forecast won't tell you. Equipment, humidity, poor ventilation, and the workload itself. On the outdoor side, the usual suspects. Construction sites and roofing, agriculture and landscaping, outdoor crews and utilities. Direct sun, plus heavy exertion, plus PPE that traps heat against the body. But here's the side that gets missed. Indoor heat. Warehouses and distribution centers, manufacturing floors and laundries, commercial kitchens and bakeries, maintenance rooms, boiler rooms, anywhere with high heat equipment. The workers in those spaces are exposed every shift, and they rarely show up in a heat plan that was written with a job site in mind. The controls are different too. Ventilation, fans where they actually help, cooled break areas, humidity controls, shielding around hot equipment, and process changes. And from an employer risk view, the rule is simple. Your indoor employees go into training, monitoring, emergency response, and documentation exactly the same way your outdoor crews do. No second tier. The NEP names 55 high-risk industries. I won't read all of them, but let me give you the core examples, and then the part HR really needs to hear, which is which workers are most exposed. On the industry side, construction, roofing, paving, framing in direct sun. Agriculture, fieldwork, long shifts, limited shade. Warehousing, hot interiors, loading docks, mezzanines. Manufacturing, process heat, furnaces, dense floors. Distribution and transport, trailers, yards, delivery routes. And kitchens and laundries, steam, ovens, poor ventilation. Now the worker groups, because this is where our policies and our onboarding live. New and returning workers who haven't yet adjusted to the heat load. Temporary and staffing agency workers who are often out there before they've been trained. Isolated or lone workers where there's nobody to spot the early symptoms. And high exertion roles where heavy work plus PPE drives core body temperature up fast. If you want to know where your risk concentrates, it's at the intersection of those industries and those 4 groups. That intersection is where HR can make the biggest difference. This is the core control, and the word that matters is mandatory. not available if someone asks. Water. Easy access to cool drinking water, encouragement to hydrate regularly, and electrolyte replacement for heavy work. Don't make people walk a quarter mile to a single cooler. Rest. As the heat rises, breaks get more frequent and longer. And I want to challenge the instinct that flinches at that. Breaks are a prevention control. They are not lost productivity. Schedule the recovery time. Don't leave it to whoever's running the shift to improvise. Shade and cooling. Shaded or cooled rest areas that workers can actually reach without losing their break walking to them. Available during the shift, not just at the lunch whistle. And back to our last point, cooling for indoor sites too, not only the outdoor crews. Action step for the room. If water, rest, and shade are technically there, but practically inconvenient, your workers won't use them. And on paper, you'll look compliant while people still go down. Make it real, not nominal. This is one of the most useful things you can build because it takes the guesswork away from your supervisors. It's a trigger-based framework. You can anchor it on heat index, WBGT, or National Weather Service alerts. One important caveat: this is a practical planning framework, not a universal final federal legal standard. Build it so your supervisors never have to guess what to do. 4 levels. Level 1. Warm conditions begin. The employer action: provide water access, send reminders, open shaded or cooled rest areas, run basic heat awareness. Document it with your training roster, a water and rest checklist, and a daily supervisor note. Level 2. Heat stress increases. Now you add rest breaks, monitor for symptoms, slow the pace, rotate tasks, and raise supervisor oversight. Document it with a break schedule, a monitoring log, and a rotation record. Level 3. An NWS advisory or your own site trigger hits. You activate the full heat plan, review emergency response, adjust scheduling, and document the controls. Your records here: a heat alert log, a HIIPP activation note, and a crew briefing record. Level 4. Symptoms are reported or observed. Stop work for that worker, move them to a cool area, give first aid per protocol, and escalate to medical help. Document it with an incident or near miss report, a response timeline, and the corrective action you took. Notice the HR thread running down that whole right-hand column. Every level produces a record. That's not bureaucracy. That's the evidence that protects everyone when questions come later. This is the remedy that prevents the tragedies you read about, and it's also the one employers skip most often. The rule of thumb: never put a new or returning worker straight into a full heat workload. You build their tolerance over roughly 7 to 14 days where it's feasible. This follows NIOS guidance. For brand new workers, the stage schedule looks like this: no more than 20% of the full heat exposure on day 1, and then no more than a 20% increase each day after. So day 1 is 20%, day 2, 40%, day 3, 60%, day 4, 80%, and you reach 100% around day 5. For returning experienced workers, people coming back from leave, a different role, or the off-season, you can use a shorter ramp. 50% on day 1, 60% on day 2, 80% on day 3, and 100% by day 4. Here's why this is an HR issue and not just a supervisor issue. The most dangerous days are a worker's first days. That's exactly when onboarding, scheduling, and staffing decisions are being made. By us. From an employer risk standpoint, dropping someone into a full heat load on day 1 isn't aggressive productivity. It's the single clearest way to get someone hurt. This slide is squarely in HR and recruiting's lane, so I want to spend a moment here. Why are temp workers higher risk? Several reasons stack up. They're often exposed before they're trained, acclimatized, or familiar with the site's hazards. They may not know where the rest areas are, where the water is, how to report a problem, or who to call in an emergency. There's often genuine confusion about who even owns their safety, the host employer or the staffing agency. And this one matter. They may fear that reporting symptoms could cost them the assignment, so they stay quiet. So here's the HR and staffing action plan. Clarify in writing who trains the worker before they start: host, agency, or both. Give them the site-specific information: heat hazards, rest areas, water points, reporting steps, emergency contacts. Build heat safety duties into your staffing contracts and vendor onboarding. Track temp worker training and acclimatization the same way you track your direct employees, not in some separate, looser bucket. And confirm out loud that temp workers can report symptoms without retaliation. If you take one thing from this slide, a contingent worker getting hurt is still your incident, your investigation, and your exposure. Treat their safety like it's yours, because functionally, it is. Supervisors are the front line. They're the people standing there when a worker starts to fade. So they decide in real time whether your beautiful written plan actually does anything. Two things they need. First, the ability to recognize the warning signs, to spot heat exhaustion and heat stroke early, before a worker collapses. Second, real authority, genuine power to slow the work, rotate workers, add breaks, move people to a cool area, and escalate for medical support. Authority without a script fails, and a script without authority fails. They need both. What supervisors should do: use short, scenario-based training, not someone reading the policy aloud. Activate breaks and rotations early, not at the last possible moment. Document the actions they take, and own heat accountability as part of the job, not as an extra. What supervisors should not do: discourage or quietly penalize breaks, ignore or downplay symptoms a worker reports, discipline anyone for raising a heat concern, or wait until somebody collapses before they act. That last should not is also an anti-retaliation issue, which lands right back on HR's desk. The way a supervisor handles a worker who speaks up becomes the story your whole crew tells each other about whether it's safe to report. Train for that. Two remedies together here because they work as a pair. Catch it early, then respond fast. First, what everyone, supervisors and coworkers, should be watching for: confusion, dizziness, heavy sweating, weakness, cramps, nausea, headache, and disorientation. The buddy system exists because the affected worker is often the last person to realize how bad it's getting. Someone else has to notice. Then, when symptoms appear, you act in order. 1. Stop and move. Stop the affected worker and get them to shade or a cooled area. 2. First aid. Begin cooling and first aid per your training and company protocol. 3. Escalate. Know when to call EMS, and don't wait to see if it passes. That instinct to wait and see is exactly what turns heat exhaustion into heat stroke. 4. Communicate. Keep your contacts, site directions, and communications ready, especially for remote or outdoor sites where help isn't around the corner. From an HR standpoint, this is where you make sure the emergency plan isn't theoretical. Has anyone actually walked it? Does the new supervisor know the EMS number and the gate code? Test it before you need it. This remedy is about reducing the heat load itself instead of just helping people survive it. 4 levers. Shift the timing. Move heavy work to the cooler parts of the day where you can. Rotate and relieve. Rotate workers, bring in relief crews, and ease the physical pace. Reschedule the non-essential. Push non-critical tasks out of the extreme heat windows entirely. And revisit your production targets. Review them during heat events, so safety isn't being quietly traded for output by a crew trying to hit a number. Now, here's the HR specific flag on this slide, and it's a big one. Coordinate with payroll and timekeeping. The moment you start changing schedules, adding breaks, and moving shifts, you create wage and hour exposure if paid and unpaid time isn't handled consistently with your policy and applicable law. The last thing you want is to solve a heat problem and create a wage hour problem on top of it. So loop payroll in before the heat event, not after the complaint. We've come back around to the theme that's run through this entire session. Prove it. The blunt version, if it isn't documented, OSHA may treat it as if it never happened. So keep the file inspection ready and review it before summer, not the morning the inspector arrives. Here's the file you want to be able to put your hands on. Your written heat plan, the HIIPP, training records, heat monitoring logs, acclimatization schedules, break schedules, incident and near-miss reports, corrective actions, emergency response records, and your staffing, vendor coordination, and temp worker training. And here's the test inspectors actually apply, which I want you to hear clearly. The records have to show the plan is active in daily operations, not just sitting in a binder or a shared drive. Living evidence beats a perfect policy nobody follows. A thin file that proves you're actually doing the work will protect you better than a gorgeous policy document that's never left the folder. From the HR side, a lot of these records are ours to keep or to prompt, so own that. This remedy is about reducing the heat load itself, instead of just helping people survive it. 4 levers. Shift the timing. Move heavy work to the cooler parts of the day where you can. Rotate and relieve. Rotate workers, bring in relief crews, and ease the physical pace. Reschedule the non-essential. Push non-critical tasks out of the extreme heat windows entirely. And revisit your production targets. Review them during heat events, so safety isn't being quietly traded for output by a crew trying to hit a number. Now, here's the HR specific flag on this slide, and it's a big one. Coordinate with payroll and timekeeping. The moment you start changing schedules, adding breaks, and moving shifts, you create wage and hour exposure if paid and unpaid time isn't handled consistently with your policy and applicable law. The last thing you want is to solve a heat problem and create a wage hour problem on top of it. So loop payroll in before the heat event, not after the complaint. Now let's make this concrete by role, because the company doesn't keep anyone safe. Specific people in specific seats do. I'll start with the people-facing functions, because the whole premise of this webinar is that heat safety is not EHS only. HR business partners and HR operations. Connect heat safety to the people workflows you already own. Onboarding, manager training, policy communication, leave and accommodation routing, and anti-retaliation reminders. Recruiting and staffing. Protect new and temporary workers before assignment. Coordinate with your vendors, provide site-specific heat information, and flag who needs acclimatization. Payroll and timekeeping. Keep us out of wage hour trouble. Confirm that rest breaks, schedule and shift changes, and paid versus unpaid time are all handled consistently with policy and law. The training team. Make the program understandable. Short modules built around scenarios, symptoms, reporting steps, and the decision points supervisors actually face. And employees themselves. Report symptoms and follow the controls. Hydrate, take the required breaks, watch their coworkers, and raise heat concerns early. Look at that list. Every single one of those is an HR adjacent function. This is why heat belongs on our agenda. The other half of the operating model is the safety and operations chain. And the structure here is simple. Leadership funds it, EHS owns the hazard, and supervisors execute it at the job site. Each layer is accountable for its piece. Organization and leadership set accountability and fund the controls. In practical terms, that means approving who owns the heat plan, releasing the resources and staffing support, standing up the emergency response structure, and setting the expectation that the program is inspection ready. EHS and safety own the hazard assessment and the heat controls. Practically, monitor heat conditions, design the controls, train the supervisors, track incidents, and maintain OSHA-ready records. Supervisors and managers execute the plan at the job site level. Practically, activate breaks, monitor for symptoms, rotate workers, document their actions, and escalate emergencies. Why am I, in HR, walking you through the EHS chain? Because heat illness lives in the seams between these functions. Where leadership assumes EHS has it, EHS assumes supervisors are doing it, and supervisors assume someone funded it. HR is often the function that sees across all those seams. That's our value here, making sure no layer quietly assumes another layer has it covered. Let's talk plainly about where employers get hurt, and then about how to say things accurately, because the wording matters. 6 places employers get burned. OSHA inspection exposure. No proof you identified hazards, trained workers, or used feasible controls. Worker injury and emergency. Heat illness escalates fast when symptoms get missed or ignored. Productivity disruption. Downtime, crew disruption, emergency costs, and morale damage. Staffing risk. Untrained, unacclimatized temp and new workers who leave, complain, or get hurt. Supervisor inconsistency. Every supervisor handling breaks differently because there's no clear plan. And documentation and retaliation. Informal practices with no proof. Plus, claims that someone was punished for raising a concern. Now, the framing corrections, because how you talk about this can create risk all by itself. Don't say, the final federal heat rule is now in effect nationwide. Say instead, heat enforcement is active through the updated NEP, while the broader federal rule is still in rulemaking. Don't say, heat illness is only an EHS issue. Say, it takes HR, EHS, and operations working together. Onboarding, staffing, training, breaks, schedules, and records. Don't say, heat is only an outdoor construction problem. Say, OSHA and NIOSH recognize indoor risks too. Warehouses, manufacturing, kitchens, laundries. And don't say, water, rest, and shade alone solves it. Say, that's the core, but you add acclimatization, monitoring, training, emergency response, and records. Accurate language isn't just about being careful. It's about not handing anyone a reason to doubt the rest of your program. Before we wrap, I want to turn this from listening into doing. 6 questions, and I'd genuinely sit with each one, because the honest answers tell you exactly where your gaps are. 1. Do we have a written, site-specific heat illness prevention plan that covers both indoor and outdoor work? 2. Could we prove to an OSHA inspector today that our heat controls are active in daily operations? 3. Who trains and acclimatizes our temporary and staffing agency workers? And is that in writing? 4. Do our supervisors have clear authority to stop work and add breaks without fear of pushback from above? 5. Where is our biggest blind spot? Indoor heat, documentation, or contingent workers? And 6. What is the one thing we will fix before peak heat season this year? If you only answer that last one honestly and act on it, This hour was worth it. Here's the checklist to take back to your team. Run down it and mark where you actually stand, not where you intend to be. Your written heat illness prevention plan is updated and site-specific. Indoor and outdoor heat risk areas are identified. Water, rest, shade or cooling, and hydration access are genuinely operational. Your heat trigger escalation table is ready in supervisors' hands. Acclimatization is built into onboarding and return to work planning. Temporary worker responsibilities are clarified with your staffing vendors. Supervisors are trained on symptoms, stop work, emergency response, and documentation. Workers know how to report symptoms without fear of retaliation. The buddy system and monitoring are active during high heat work. Schedules and workloads can flex during heat advisories. Your emergency response has been tested with site directions and contacts ready. And your records are maintained. Training, monitoring logs, breaks, incidents, and corrective actions. If you can honestly check every box, you're in strong shape. Anywhere you hesitated, that's your to-do list for this week. Let me leave you with the one sentence that holds this whole session together. Don't wait for the final rule. Build the system now. OSHA's heat enforcement and inspection focus are already active through the updated NEP. You don't get to wait for the federal rule to be finalized because the risk is here today. A documented site-specific heat prevention system, one that covers indoor and outdoor work, your supervisors, your temporary workers, and your records, is your strongest protection for both your people and your organization. So 3 things to carry out the door. Prepare now. Enforcement is active today. Coordinate the roles, HR, EHS, operations, staffing, and payroll together. And document everything. Proof the plan is active every day. Thank you for spending this time. And one last reminder, this has been educational content, not legal advice. For decisions about your specific sites, bring in qualified counsel or a safety professional. Go build the system before the heat does it for you.